With 2 million Canadians forced to go to a food bank, will he stop thinking about buying himself better news coverage and start thinking about the Canadians who have to buy themselves better food?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back to question period today, where Pierre handed Justin another intellectual smackdown. No wonder he doesn't like showing up for work.
Let's take a look.
Canadians who open their fridges only to find that there's no food in them, and they have to go to food banks. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, they're already experiencing austerity in their daily lives. And the Prime Minister wants to make things worse with another $20 billion in inflationary spending. He's increased inflation and interest rates at the expense of Canadians. Will he finally reverse his inflationary policies so that Canadians can eat? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think the Leader of the Opposition's logic is a bit faulty. He rightly finds that Canadians are struggling to afford groceries, but he's proposing government austerity as the solution to help those families. But that's so far-fetched, Mr. Speaker. We are investing to help families. We're investing in housing. We're investing to bring down and stabilize grocery prices. We're investing in careers and jobs for the future. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party is voting against dental care for seniors, voting against assistance to companies that will help grow jobs.
I love how he tries to spin this. So, because the Conservatives are saying, can we please have some fiscal responsibility and balance the budget to stop interest rates from going up, Trudeau turns around and says, oh, well, the Conservatives just want austerity through cuts. And austerity, just to remind everybody what this word means, because it's not a word that is commonly used in day-to-day language, it essentially means you are only spending the absolute bare minimum and you are giving up extra expenditures.
You mean how Canadians are being forced to live right now?
Right. So what Trudeau is saying is, we're going to make Canadians do that, but the government, we can spend however we want because, you know, we're investing in people. The only thing that they're doing is trying to find ways to collect more taxes. And Trudeau announced that earlier today. They are revisiting the digital services tax. So evidently Bill C-18 isn't working like they thought it was going to, so they're not going to get revenue from Meta and Facebook. So they're going to go a different route, despite the fact that the US told them, stop, don't do that. We are working with the OECD to figure out a worldwide approach to this. But Trudeau's like, no, you can't tell me what to do. And he's going to start looking at taxing US companies, which includes social media platforms. Gee, could that be Facebook and Google? So no doubt he is feeling a lot of pressure from the news agencies about this. And he's also trying to figure out, how the heck am I going to be paying for all this stuff?
Well, if news agencies actually put out stuff that people wanted to watch and read, they wouldn't be in this mess.
No. And if Trudeau actually would spend our money wisely, we wouldn't be in this mess either.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So ashamed of his own economic update that he wants to avoid talking about it for the week that follows. So we can understand why. Next year he wants to spend $53 billion on debt interest, a record-smashing amount that is higher than the amount we spend on healthcare. Works out to $3,000 for every Canadian family. According to according to the Bank of Nova Scotia, this is going to increase interest rates by 2 full percentage points, or $700 a year, directly attributable to this government's deficit spending. So will he get a control of himself and control of his spending so Canadians can get control of their mortgage costs?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, I will admit
openly to you and to others in this House that the media didn't cover our fall economic statement as much as we would have liked last week, because they were so busy talking about what a terrible week the Conservative Party had on Ukraine, on allegations of terrorism, on attacking Stellantis and jobs in Southern Ontario. Yes, the media were totally wrapped up in the Leader of the Opposition's terrible week. But we stay focused on investing in housing for Canadians, on stepping up, on more competition to helping grocery prices, and moving forward and creating great jobs and careers for Canadians for decades to come.
So what Trudeau just unwillingly admitted was that his bought and paid for media was so busy chasing ghosts and lies about the Conservative Party that they didn't report on actual news. Right. That's what I'm hearing.
Right? Like, it's so ridiculous. What's even more ridiculous is that, yes, the media were so enamored and were so invested in chasing all of these lies and trying to fall over themselves to collect their $129 million in funding that the Trudeau government has promised them, that, you know, they seem to forget that it doesn't matter what the media is covering. It matters what Canadians think. And you know what Canadians think? Well, something special happened today, folks. Something special happened in the polls. A Nanos, remember, Liberal-friendly poll, a Nanos poll was released today. And Mr. Nick Nanos was on CTV talking about this. What was this poll, you might ask? Well, let's take a look and see where the Liberals are. Look at this. The Liberals have fallen so mightily that they are now tied with the NDP.
Wow.
Now, I didn't know if the Liberals were going to be able to fall to a point where the NDP may catch them or overtake them as the potential new official opposition if an election were to be held today. But here it is, folks.
Yeah, there's a fighting chance there.
And here's the other ridiculous thing about this poll. If you add the Liberals and the NDP, only then do they have a chance of eclipsing the Conservatives, and just barely.
3 points.
The Conservatives are sitting at a comfortable 41% lead. And this is today. This is like taking into account last week, folks.
Yeah, this horrible, quote unquote, horrible week that the Conservatives had, you know, dodging Liberal lies and BS.
Here's the other news as a result of last week. Pierre's numbers went up.
Like I said, Pierre campaign isn't working for you, is it, Trudeau?
Pierre's numbers went up. So 34.1% of Canadians prefer him as the Prime Minister. Trudeau, down 4.3%.
That's huge.
He is out of the 20s now. 19%. And Singh, despite his party going up, he went down 1.6%.
Because the longer he hangs on, the worse it is for him and the party. I mean, the party's gone up a little bit, but the worse it is for him because you see this guy voting with the Liberals in the House of Commons and then immediately running to Twitter to complain about it.
So if the Conservatives had such a horrible week in the media, Canadians didn't notice. Maybe it's because Canadians aren't watching the media anymore.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, maybe he should just give the media even more money to cover the news how he'd like it, Mr. Speaker, because we know he's so desperate to debate me on the carbon tax, a debate he's been losing badly. Canadians overwhelmingly want him to axe the tax. That's why he panicked and flip-flopped to take the tax off for a short time, and only for those people who are in a region where he's plummeting in the polls and his caucus is revolting. With 2 million Canadians forced to go to a food bank, will he stop thinking about buying himself better news coverage and start thinking about the Canadians who have to buy themselves better food?
Wow.
That was amazing.
That was awesome. Remember we were talking about this yesterday, and if you haven't watched yesterday's question period video, go and watch it right now. It's actually a good one. We put in a lot of effort to it. But we talked about this yesterday, where Pierre is very strategic in the questions that he directly responds to and the points that he directly responds to. He's very careful not to fall into any traps and talk about the issues that the Liberals want him to talk about. But here he directly responds to what Trudeau is saying, and it's funny. I guess we're on the same wavelength about the bought and paid for media. So really good rebuttal to that.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to hear the Conservative leader again attacking the media, particularly on a day where we stood up and arranged a deal with Google to make sure that local journalism, that independent journalism, that the work that our news media is going to do is going to be able to stand the test of time through this transforming times we live in. The leader of the opposition continues to want to stand with big data, with internet giants, to sidle up to his billionaire buddies down south. We're going to continue to stand up for local journalism, for the work that professionals do to support our democracy in small towns and communities right across the country.
So, what Trudeau just said there is interesting. And I love how everybody on their side is standing up and clapping.
Well, and this is the first we've heard of this. Allegedly, the Canadian government and Google came to an agreement regarding Bill C-18.
Yeah, so this just happened not too long ago today.
Like 6 hours ago.
So here's the thing. This is actually a big loss for C-18 because they actually have to fundamentally change some pieces in the bill. What are these pieces they have to change? Well, here's the quote-unquote agreement. As part of the agreement, Google will contribute $100 million in financial support annually, indexed to inflation, for a wide range of news businesses across the country, including independent news businesses and those from Indigenous and official language minority communities. This is lower than what the government initially estimated, whereby it proposed a formula forcing Google and Meta to cough up 4% of their annual Canadian search revenue, or $172 million and $62 million respectively. That remained unpalatable to Google, which insisted on a firm cap on its financial liability. Right. This was one of Google's main problems with this, because if you have, think about it, a whole bunch of new immigrants coming in every year and everybody's using Google, you have another potential 500,000 people using Google within Canada every year and potentially sharing news links and all of this stuff. So that puts them at dramatically increased liability every single year. That 4% can go up dramatically. So there's no way for them to actually plan in their business as to what that's going to cost. And initially, it wasn't 170 million. It was something like 314 million between both Google and Meta. So this is actually a drop in the bucket. And the other thing here that's interesting is independent media and minority language media is included in here. That wasn't really at the core of C-18. The core of C-18 was CTV and Globe and Mail and CBC. CBC by far. I think they were going to get 3/4.
Yeah, they were going to get the lion's share of that money.
So this is actually a big loss for what they initially wanted. And I don't know if the news agencies are going to be happy with this. But at this point, they might just be willing to take anything. Like, this is a drop in the bucket between all of the different news agencies. So it's not a win.
Well, if you think about it, this $100 million that Google has agreed to providing Canadian news, the taxpayer, us, we're giving them $129 million, and that was just in this fall economic update.
Right. Now, the other thing that that Google won on is very significant. Another win for Google is the option to work with a single collective to distribute its contribution to all interested eligible news businesses. That would help the company limit its arbitration risk. So if you recall, in Bill C-18, what they were going to be required to do is enter into a negotiation with each news agency individually. So the problem is from a legal perspective, there's liability with every single deal that you sign. So with all of the different media agencies within Canada, Google would have to have a contract for every single one of those. And they have to go through this ridiculous process that was outlined in the bill. So now Google can just say, all right, I'm giving this to one entity and you guys figure it out. So now there's one deal and one path that they could potentially be taken to arbitration. So this is a big win for Google. They cap their liability, which is what they wanted. So it's predictable revenue year over year, and they drastically limit their exposure from a legal perspective. So given that this is almost half of what the Parliamentary Budget Office initially projected, this isn't a great news story for Trudeau.
Well, and personally, I'm not sure how I feel about this. On the one hand, I'm happy that Google reached an agreement before the December 14th cutoff, because we do use Google almost exclusively when we're trying to find articles and research facts and look for graphs and stats and what have you. So the fact that they're not blocking Canadian news is a win for us here at Northern Perspective. But at the same time, I don't like it because now it's shown that the Canadian government can bully companies outside of the country into doing what it wants.
Yeah, and again, the revenue difference between Facebook and Google, it's a lot different, so that's why probably Facebook could deal with it. I don't like that they caved to the shakedown. I really don't. No.
But selfishly, it helps for us to be able to access news through Google.
Well, here's the thing. Google is going to make up that 100 million somewhere. So the question is where's that coming from? That remains to be seen.